The snow had already begun to gather on the porch steps when Nathan Carter stepped out of his rental car. The cold bit at his cheeks as he looked up at the weathered house he hadn't visited in over a year. The roof was sagging a little more. One of the shutters had fallen off entirely, but the lights were on, and smoke trailed lazily from the chimney. That meant Raymond Carter was still alive, at least in body. Nathan pulled his coat tighter and approached the front door. He knocked twice. No answer. He hesitated, then pushed it open. It creaked on its hinges, just like he remembered. Inside, the house was dim and smelled faintly of tobacco and old books. A lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, casting warm light over. The silhouette of an aging man slumped in a threadbare armchair. An empty bottle of whiskey stood sentry beside him on a coffee table, cluttered with coasters, pill bottles, and yellowing mail. "Dad?" Nathan said, stepping in cautiously. Raymond didn't look up. His eyes were open, staring at the muted television where a weather report scrolled across the bottom of the screen. His hand, trembling slightly, rested on the armrest, his fingers drumming a slow, uneven rhythm. "I knocked," Nathan added, voice softer now. "I heard you," Raymond said without turning. His voice was gravel, dry and hard. "Doors never locked." Nathan set his bag down by the wall. "Yeah, still smells like winter in here." Raymond didn't respond. Nathan moved to the kitchen, flicked on the overhead light, and was met with a sink full of dishes, a sticky countertop, and the familiar hum of a refrigerator that should have been replaced 10 years ago. He filled a glass of water, brought it back to the living room, and placed it gently on the table beside the whiskey. Raymond's eyes flickered toward the glass, then away again. "You been eating?" Nathan asked. A shrug. Then, after a moment, "Sarah brought groceries last week. Sarah left for Florida 3 weeks ago." No answer. Nathan sat down on the couch across from him. It was the same couch from his childhood, sagging in the middle, corduroy worn thin on the arms. He looked at his father. Time had carved deep lines into Raymond's face. His hair, once jet black and military short, was now a thin patch of silver. But his eyes, those eyes, still held the same darkness, still locked behind some invisible wall. Nathan cleared his throat. "The VA called me." Raymond said nothing. "They said you missed 3 appointments, said your pain's probably worse in the cold." Still nothing. Only the sound of the furnace kicking on in the background. Nathan leaned forward. "You gonna keep pretending nothing's wrong or, I'm fine?" "You're not. You look like hell, Dad. You're losing weight, your back's killing you, and you've got that damn bottle as your only friend." Raymond's fingers curled slowly into a fist on the armrest. "I didn't come here to fight," Nathan added. "But you can't keep living like this." Raymond's voice was low. "Then don't come." Nathan stood up. "That's your answer? Push everyone away until..." "What?" "Until we bury you next to Mom without ever saying what needs to be said." At that, Raymond turned his head slightly, just slightly. His eyes met Nathan's for a fraction of a second, and then drifted back to the TV. Nathan exhaled. He noticed, for the first time in years, the jagged scar just barely visible beneath the collar of Raymond's flannel shirt, curving over his shoulder like a twisted snake. He remembered touching it once as a child, before being sharply warned never to do that again. The scar hadn't faded. Neither had the silence that came with it. Nathan sat back down, quieter this time. "I used to think you were just cold, or angry, but now, I think you're just tired of carrying it alone." Raymond didn't answer, but his hands stopped shaking. Nathan stayed the night, not because his father asked, he never did, but because something in the silence felt heavier than usual. He made a bed on the old couch, the same one he'd fallen asleep on as a boy during snowstorms and power outages. Back then, the house felt alive, warm, full of soft music and the smell of his mother's cooking. Now, it was as though the walls themselves had forgotten how to hold joy. He woke early. Raymond was already up, standing by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the snow-covered backyard. Nathan watched him for a moment, taking in the rigid posture, the slight hunch of pain. His father's silhouette looked like a man still waiting for orders that would never come. "Coffee's cold," Raymond said without turning. "Didn't know if you were staying." "I was," Nathan said. "You okay?" Raymond took a sip and grimaced. "It's just the cold, messes with the back." Nathan didn't respond. He'd heard that excuse for over 30 years, every winter, like clockwork. He grabbed a fresh mug and poured himself coffee. I found some old photos yesterday, Nathan said, in the hallway closet, back when Mom was still alive. Raymond said nothing. She used to put them in albums, remember? You in uniform, her holding Sarah as a baby. There was one from the 4th of July, '84, I think, where you were actually smiling. Raymond glanced at him, just once, then returned his gaze to the window. That was before. Before what? Nathan asked, already knowing. Raymond didn't answer. They stood in silence until Nathan finally spoke again. You ever gonna talk about it? He asked. Vietnam. Mike. Any of it? Raymond's fingers tightened around the mug. His voice came out like a distant growl. It's done. Doesn't change anything, but it changed you. Raymond turned, and for the first time that morning his eyes met Nathan's. There was no anger there, just the worn-out weight of memory. You think I don't know that? Nathan sighed, sat at the table. You used to be different. Before you shipped out, you were, what? 32? A new dad. A husband. You were funny. You used to sing when you cooked. You used to take Sarah sledding even when it hurt your knees. She was 5 when I left, Raymond said quietly. Didn't even cry at the airport, just looked at me like I was going to work. You were supposed to come back the same. No one comes back the same, Raymond said, and no one wants to hear about the version that did. Nathan didn't speak. He didn't need to. Raymond sat across from him slowly, wincing as he adjusted his back. The chair creaked under his weight. I wrote letters, Raymond said after a pause. When I was over there, every week. She never got most of them. Mom said you stopped writing. I didn't. They just didn't reach her. Mail was chaos. She thought I was gone. She thought I'd changed sides. That's not true. Raymond gave him a look. You were a kid. You don't remember the fights, the way she looked at me when I got home, like I'd brought the war with me. Nathan hesitated. Maybe you did. Raymond didn't argue. He just stared into his coffee like it held something more than bitterness. You remember that trip to the lake? You were 8. Sarah was 6. Your mom made sandwiches and we all got sunburned. I remember. I had a breakdown that night, Raymond said. Locked myself in the bathroom. Thought I was back under fire. Yelled at her like she was a goddamn VC. Nathan's jaw tightened. She never told us that. She covered for me. For years. Raymond paused. Until she couldn't anymore. The room went quiet. The snow outside softened the world into silence. I didn't mean to ruin everything, Raymond said, barely above a whisper. But I couldn't be the man she married anymore. That man died out there. I just came back wearing his skin. Nathan swallowed. We would have helped you. If you'd let us. I didn't deserve help. Yes, you did, Nathan said, his voice trembling. You still do. Raymond looked up at him again, and for the briefest moment, his eyes shimmered with something other than pain. Maybe regret. Maybe gratitude. It was hard to tell. Then, just like that, it was gone. I should check the mail, Raymond muttered, standing slowly. Nathan watched him shuffle to the door, hand pressed to his lower back. For the first time in years, he didn't see a stubborn old man. He saw a soldier still trying to come home. Later that afternoon, the pain returned. Nathan found his father hunched over the kitchen sink, one hand pressed flat against the counter, the other gripping the edge, as if bracing for a wave that only he could feel. Raymond's shoulders shook, not violently, but subtly, like a tremor just beneath the surface of earth before a quake. You okay? Nathan asked, already knowing the answer. Raymond didn't look up. It's nothing. Just stiff. That's not stiffness, Dad. That's pain. You need to let someone look at it. Raymond straightened slowly, grimacing. I've had worse. Yeah, and you keep pretending that makes this normal. Before Raymond could reply, the front door opened without warning. Sarah's voice rang from the hallway. Dad, I brought you some groceries. Raymond groaned softly, almost like a reflex. Nathan moved toward the doorway to greet her. Sarah stepped in with 2 paper bags in her arms, bundled in a heavy coat, her hair wet with snow. She looked younger than her 42 years, but her eyes had the same weary distance Nathan saw in his own reflection. She paused when she saw her father, stiff and pale near the sink. You're not supposed to be on your feet like that, Raymond muttered. I'm fine. Sarah dropped the bags on the counter. You're always fine, until you collapse and someone calls me from the ER. I didn't ask you to come. No, you never do. Nathan stood between them, arms crossed. We were just talking about getting him to a doctor. He won't go, Sarah said, looking at her brother, then back at Raymond. He hasn't gone in years. Raymond's voice darkened. I don't need a doctor to tell me I'm dying. Silence. The room turned cold, as if someone had opened a window. Sarah blinked. You think you're dying? Raymond finally met her eyes. I've known it for a long time. There's metal in my back, Sarah. Stone. Pieces of something I should have left in another country. I've lived with it longer than either of you have been alive. Nathan exhaled, stepping forward. Then let someone help. Get the scans. Figure out what's still in there. Maybe it's not too late. Raymond's hand slammed the counter. It's not about what's still in there. It's about what should have been taken out of me 50 years ago but wasn't. What they put in my head, what I saw, what I left behind. Sarah flinched. I remember when you used to read us bedtime stories, she said quietly. Back before you stopped talking altogether. I used to wait outside your room just to hear your voice again. You don't even know that, do you? Raymond stared at her blankly. You gave up on us, she said, tears welling. Long before Mom died, you locked yourself in that damn war and left us out here to deal with a ghost. Nathan moved to speak, but she held up a hand to stop him. Don't defend him. I'm not, Nathan said. I'm tired too. Sarah turned back to her father. You can't bring back Mike. You can't undo Vietnam. But you have a chance to not die alone and in pain in this house. Raymond looked away. I'm not afraid of pain. No, she said. You're afraid of memory. You're afraid that if someone looks inside you, physically or otherwise, they'll see everything you've buried. And maybe they will. But maybe you'll finally be free. Raymond stood still for a long moment. His breathing labored. Then he turned and walked slowly toward the living room, lowering himself into the armchair with visible effort. I don't want anyone's pity, he said quietly. We don't pity you, Sarah replied, her voice breaking. We love you. God help us. We still love you. Nathan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. We're not asking you to fix everything. We're asking you to let us in. Raymond said nothing. He sat with his eyes closed, his hands trembling faintly in his lap. Nathan looked at Sarah. We'll try again tomorrow. She nodded. Tomorrow, the memory came to him like it always did, in fragments, not in dreams, but in the quiet moments between blinks, when the present softened just enough to let the past bleed through. Saigon, 1970. The heat was relentless, even at night. The air buzzed with the hum of diesel generators and the distant thump of helicopters coming in to land. Inside the small, dimly lit control tower on the edge of Tan Son Nhut Air Base, Raymond sat hunched over a headset, sweat clinging to the back of his neck like a second skin. The console in front of him blinked with colored lights and radar blips, dozens of them, each representing an aircraft that needed to land, refuel, resupply, or get the hell out. Victor 4, you're cleared to land runway 01. Wind is calm, he said into the mic, his voice calm, practiced. Across from him, Mike Delaney crunched on a piece of dried mango and raised an eyebrow. You ever think about doing this back home? LAX or JFK? Raymond didn't look up. Too many tourists. Not enough mortars. Mike snorted. Dark. I like it. Mike was the opposite of Raymond in nearly every way. Taller, leaner, always smirking. His fatigues were perpetually wrinkled, and he had a habit of tucking cigarettes behind both ears even when he wasn't smoking. Menthols, the kind that made the whole radar room smell like mint and asphalt. Raymond trusted him more than anyone in country. You get that package from home yet? Mike asked, adjusting his headset. Raymond shook his head. Mail's been delayed again, probably sitting in Guam. Mike leaned back in his chair. My sister sent me cookies, chocolate chip. You want one? Are they edible? Define edible. Raymond allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Pass. The tower shook slightly as something exploded in the distance, probably artillery, maybe a rocket. No one flinched. 2 months ago, they would have hit the floor. Now it was background noise. Mike pulled out a small notebook and started sketching something. He was always drawing, planes, faces, cartoons of the officers with ridiculous mustaches. He flipped it toward Raymond. It was a caricature of Raymond, slouched at the console, labeled the silent assassin of Sector 4. Raymond grunted. That's not how I look. You're right, I made you too tall. A voice crackled through the radio, urgent, clipped. A transport plane had gone dark 10 clicks northwest of the base. Last contact, low altitude, heading toward a zone that had recently seen heavy movement from Viet Cong units. Raymond sat upright. Call recon? They're busy with the convoy down south. What about signal triangulation? Mike shook his head. Already tried. Nothing clear. We've got static and a half ping from somewhere near Fulham. Raymond's fingers hovered over the console. Could have been hit, or crashed, or landed, Mike offered. Unlikely. Mike stood. Then let's go find out. Raymond looked at him. You're kidding. I'm not. We're not field ops. Exactly. Which is why they won't see us coming. Raymond hesitated. He hated leaving the tower. Hated the idea of stepping into the jungle. But something in Mike's tone caught him off guard. That half-joking smile was gone. What was left was something sharper, more determined. They might still be alive, Mike said. One of the guys on that flight, Staff Sergeant Ruiz, played cards with him last week. He's got 2 kids. This isn't a ghost ping. It's a distress call. Raymond exhaled slowly. He looked around the room. No one else was going. No orders had come down. But the map didn't lie. If they didn't act now, no one would. Gear up, he said. Mike grinned. Knew you had it in you, assassin. They signed out a jeep under the cover of terrain inspection, a vague term that meant almost nothing and usually didn't raise questions. By midnight, they were bouncing along a narrow dirt road west of the base, moonlight flickering through the trees. Raymond kept one hand on the wheel and one near the sidearm strapped to his thigh. Mike scanned the radio frequencies, trying to pick up anything that resembled a distress call. Nothing but static. You sure about this? Raymond asked. Mike didn't answer right away. Then he said, You ever get the feeling something's gonna go wrong before it does? Every day. Good, Mike said. Means you're paying attention. The deeper they drove, the thicker the jungle pressed in on both sides, the road narrowing, until it was barely more than a trail etched into the dirt by other reckless men. Branches scratched at the windshield. The jeep's headlights bounced over uneven terrain, casting long, jittering shadows into the darkness beyond. Raymond drove in silence, jaw clenched. Mike sat beside him, the radio unit balanced on his lap, one ear pressed against the receiver. Still nothing? Raymond asked. Mike shook his head. Dead air. No pings, no static. It's like the whole damn bird vanished. They were 10 clicks out now, near the coordinates of the last known signal. Mike pointed toward a gap in the trees. Turn left. That incline should give us a better elevation for signal sweep. Raymond maneuvered the jeep off the trail, tires crunching over leaves and rocks. They stopped at the crest of a small hill, overlooking a misty patch of jungle below. In the pale moonlight, something metallic glinted. There, Mike said, grabbing a flashlight. You see that? Raymond nodded slowly. It was a wing, half buried in vegetation, charred along the edge. A few pieces of fuselage lay scattered nearby like bones in tall grass. The plane had gone down all right. Raymond cut the engine. The silence that followed was complete and unnatural, as if the entire jungle was holding its breath. They approached cautiously, sidearms drawn. The air smelled of scorched metal, oil, and something else, faint but unmistakable. Blood. Mike moved ahead first, shining the beam across the wreckage. No bodies, he said. No fire either. Looks like it skidded and broke apart. Maybe they bailed before impact, Raymond offered. Or got taken, Mike muttered. They found signs of a struggle, torn webbing, a blood trail leading away from the main body of the plane, shell casings glinting like teeth in the underbrush. Ray, Mike said, kneeling near a patch of disturbed soil. Someone was dragged. Raymond swallowed. We should get back. Call it in. Let recon sweep the zone. Mike hesitated. One more minute. I want to check that ridge over there. Raymond grabbed his arm. Mike? A sharp snap echoed through the trees. Then another. Not from their movements. Not natural. Too late, Raymond shouted. Down. The explosion lifted him off his feet and slammed him into the earth. His ears rang. The world spun in silence. Dirt rained down in slow motion. Somewhere nearby, someone was screaming. His vision cleared enough to see Mike lying on the ground, face twisted in pain, one leg pinned beneath a fallen section of wing. Blood soaked his pant leg. He was trying to move but couldn't. Raymond crawled toward him, dragging his own weight across the torn earth. His back burned. Hot and sharp like glass was embedded in his skin. Mike saw him and tried to wave him off. Go, go! They're close. Raymond reached him, trying to lift the wing, but it wouldn't budge. Mike grabbed Raymond's arm. His grip was tight, desperate. There's a second charge, probably pressure triggered. If you stay, we both die. Raymond's hands trembled. I'm not leaving you. You are, Mike said. Because that's the only way either of us makes it out. Another sound. Footsteps. Branches cracking. Voices in the distance. Foreign, low, urgent. Mike pressed something into Raymond's hand. The radio battery. Take it. Get out. Tell them where we are. Promise me. Raymond shook his head. Mike's voice cracked. Promise me, Ray. Raymond closed his eyes. I promise. He ran. He didn't remember the turns he took, or the pain in his back, or how the trees blurred past him like ghosts. Just the sound of Mike's voice fading behind him, and the explosion that came less than a minute later. Deeper, heavier, final. The shockwave knocked him down again. He hit the ground hard, clutching the battery like it was holy. He didn't go back. When he reached the base at dawn, covered in dirt and blood, no one asked why he was alone. The medics treated the shrapnel wounds without question. The report said both men had gone missing during a recon sweep. That only one returned. Raymond never corrected it. He told them the second charge went off instantly, that Mike was gone before he could do anything, that he never saw him pinned. They believed him. So did everyone else, except himself. The silence that followed Sarah's departure was heavier than any shouting match could have been. Her car engine roared to life, tires crunching over snow as she reversed down the drive. Nathan stood by the window, watching her go, arms folded tightly across his chest. Raymond hadn't moved from his chair. She always did leave angry, he muttered. Nathan turned. Maybe because you always gave her reasons to. Raymond didn't argue. He just stared at the empty space where she'd stood, minutes earlier, his jaw working like he wanted to say something but couldn't form the words. Nathan picked up the grocery bags Sarah had left behind and started unpacking them. Cans, cereal, fresh fruit that would probably go bad before Raymond touched any of it. You know, Nathan said, without looking at him, it wouldn't kill you to say thank you once in a while. Raymond leaned his head back against the chair. I never asked her to come. That's not the point. I didn't ask you either. Nathan stopped. Slowly, he turned to face his father. You think I don't know that? You think I wanted to come back here, to this house that smells like regret and old whiskey? I'm here because you're still my father, and for some insane reason, I still give a damn whether you make it through the winter. Raymond closed his eyes. I didn't ask for your pity. And you're not getting it, Nathan snapped. You're getting my presence. That's more than most people would have given you after what you've put us through. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The only sound was the wind pressing against the windows, and the soft creak of the house settling on its old bones. Eventually Raymond exhaled, slowly, as if the breath itself had been trapped for years. You staying the night? He asked. Nathan nodded. Yeah, I'll take the couch. Raymond said nothing more. He just rose with a grunt and shuffled down the hallway, one hand trailing the wall for balance. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, watching the faint glow of the porch light creep through the curtains. His mind replayed every word, every silence, every flicker of pain behind his father's eyes. He thought about Mike, the name he'd only heard in pieces, thought about the scar on his father's back, the rage, the fear, the way he flinched at loud sounds even now. Sometime after midnight, Nathan drifted off. He woke hours later to the sound of shouting. At first, he thought it was outside, some neighbor, maybe a fight in the street. But as he sat up, heart pounding, he realized the voice was coming from the hallway. It was Raymond. No, don't, Mike. I said go. You have to. Nathan rushed down the hall and pushed open the door to his father's room. Raymond was thrashing in his sleep, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, face contorted in terror. His hands clawed at the air like he was reaching for something, or someone. Raymond, Nathan said loudly, stepping to the bed. His father didn't wake. Mike, Mike. The name tore out of him like a sob. God damn it, get out of there. Nathan grabbed his shoulders. Dad, it's a dream. Wake up. Raymond's eyes flew open. For a moment, they were wild, unseeing, focused on something far away. Then they landed on Nathan's face, and the clarity returned in slow, agonizing degrees. He collapsed back into the pillow, chest heaving. Nathan knelt beside the bed. It's okay. You were dreaming. Raymond turned his head toward the wall. It wasn't a dream. Nathan swallowed. Mike? Raymond didn't answer. Nathan sat in silence, the room heavy with the smell of sweat and something deeper, like fear that had never fully left the body. Was he your best friend? Nathan asked softly. Still, Raymond didn't speak. "I found some of Mom's old letters once," Nathan said. "She mentioned him. Said you stopped saying his name after you came home." Raymond's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't deserve to." Nathan waited, gave him space. After a long pause, Raymond said, "He died because of me." Nathan leaned closer. "You want to tell me what happened?" But Raymond shook his head. "Not tonight." Nathan stood slowly. "Okay, but someday, I hope you will." He turned to leave the room. Raymond's voice stopped him. He was the only person who didn't look at me like I was broken over there, even when I was. Nathan didn't reply. He just nodded and stepped out, leaving the door open behind him. In the dim hallway light, the shadows felt softer somehow, and for the first time, Nathan realized his father's silence wasn't emptiness. It was grief, given a name. The next morning brought a thin layer of ice to the windows and an aching stillness inside the house. Nathan woke early, groggy and disoriented, the events of the night before lingering like smoke in his memory. His father's screams, the name he'd cried out, Mike, still echoed faintly in his ears. Raymond hadn't emerged from his room yet. Nathan let him be. He poured himself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and wandered into the hallway. Something compelled him to move, to keep his hands busy. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the weight of unsaid things still lingering between them. At the end of the hall was the small linen closet, barely used, its shelves cluttered with boxes of old files, frayed towels, and forgotten junk. Nathan opened it with the vague intent to organize, just to feel useful. Halfway down the stack, he found a dented metal box. It was military green, stamped with faded letters. Carter R, USAF, 521 stones ACW. Curious, he pulled it out and brought it to the dining table. The latch creaked. Inside, everything was meticulously arranged. Service medals, a rusted compass, a few black and white photos, a broken watch. Beneath it all, wrapped in a yellowing envelope, was a single letter. Nathan almost didn't touch it. There was something sacred in the way it was folded, something heavy in how untouched it looked. But curiosity outweighed reverence. The envelope was addressed to Raymond Carter, P.O., Box 71, Evansville, in USA, and the sender, Mike Delaney, Fort Leonard, Wood Veterans Recovery Center, postmarked January 1975. Nathan stared at it, stunned. His hands trembled slightly as he turned it over. It had never been opened. He looked down the hallway. Still no sign of his father. With a slow breath, he unfolded the flap and pulled out the letter. The paper was thin, the handwriting slanted but strong. "Henri, I don't know if this will reach you, or if you'll even want to read it. I don't know what you've been told. Maybe they said I died. Maybe you believed it. But I didn't. They pulled me out 2 hours after the second blast. Some ARVN unit sweeping the zone. I had a broken leg, 2 busted ribs, and a concussion. I spent 3 months in a field hospital, then another 6 in Germany before they shipped me stateside. I kept asking about you. No one knew where you were. Said you rotated home early. Said you didn't file a report. I didn't know what to think, but I figured maybe you ran. And I wouldn't blame you if you did. You did what I asked you to. You left. You survived. That's what matters. Don't carry it like a sin, Ray. You didn't kill me. You saved yourself. That was always the plan. That was always enough. Write back if you want. If not, I understand. Either way, I hope you find peace. You deserve it more than you think." Mike and Nathan read it twice, then a third time. He felt cold all over. Not from the temperature, but from the sheer weight of it. All these years, all that silence, all that guilt. He stood up, the letter still in his hand, and walked down the hall. Raymond's door was open a crack. "Dad?" he called gently. No answer. He knocked once, then stepped inside. Raymond was sitting on the edge of his bed, already dressed, staring down at the floor. His hands rested on his knees, veins like riverbeds running across the backs of them. "I found something," Nathan said. Raymond didn't move. Nathan stepped closer, then extended the letter. "It's from Mike." Raymond looked up slowly. His expression was unreadable. Nathan placed the letter in his father's hands. Raymond stared at the envelope, as if it might dissolve under his gaze. His fingers moved like they didn't trust themselves. "I didn't know he wrote," Raymond whispered. "It was in your box. You never opened it." Raymond opened the letter, hands trembling. As he read, Nathan watched something shift in his father's face. Not shock, not relief. but something raw, older, as if a dam that had held back a lifetime of grief had cracked open, not with a roar, but a quiet, steady leak. Raymond's lips moved silently as he read the last line. Then he dropped the paper onto his lap and stared straight ahead. "He was alive," Raymond said. Nathan nodded. Raymond's voice cracked. "I left him. I ran. He told you to." Raymond shook his head. "But I should have gone back. He didn't blame you. But I did." His voice was hoarse now. "I blamed me. For everything." Nathan sat beside him. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, Raymond said, "I told myself the lie because it was easier than the truth. That I failed him. That I failed all of you." "You didn't fail us, Dad," Nathan said quietly. "You just never forgave yourself." Raymond looked at him, eyes rimmed with red. "How can I?" Nathan didn't answer right away. Then he placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "Maybe by starting now." For the rest of the day, Raymond barely spoke. He sat by the window, with the letter from Mike on the table beside him, reading it over and over, as if expecting the words to change. Nathan didn't push. He gave his father space, stayed in the background, tidying the kitchen, making dinner no one touched. But by nightfall, the pain came. It started with a stiffness in Raymond's back, a deep, dragging ache he'd grown used to, but this time it didn't pass. It spread downward into his legs, coiling tight like a vice. Nathan found him in the hallway, one hand on the wall, the other clenched against his lower back. His face was pale, slick with sweat. "Dad?" Raymond tried to wave him off but nearly collapsed in the motion. Nathan caught him just in time. "That's it. We're going," Nathan said, already reaching for his phone. "No arguments this time." Raymond shook his head weakly. "Just let me sit down. It'll pass." "No, it won't. You're going to the hospital." Nathan helped him to the couch. Raymond groaned as he lowered himself, his entire body tense with pain. His hands trembled uncontrollably. "I'll drive," Nathan said. "You need more than aspirin and whiskey." Raymond closed his eyes, jaw clenched. No military docs. I'm taking you to County General, civilian doctors. No uniforms." That seemed to soften something in Raymond, or maybe the pain simply broke his resistance. He nodded once. The ride to the hospital was quiet, except for Raymond's labored breathing. Nathan drove faster than he should have, weaving through snow-dusted roads like a man with purpose. At the emergency room, a nurse helped Raymond into a wheelchair. Nathan gave his name, explained the back pain, the old injury, the sudden worsening. They were taken in quickly. Raymond barely reacted to the fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, the endless questions from the attending physician. It wasn't until the doctor, Dr. Levens, asked about prior injuries that Raymond finally spoke. "Vietnam. 1970. Shrapnel. I never had it removed." Dr. Levens paused, then nodded slowly. "Let's get some imaging done." The scans took nearly an hour. Nathan sat in the hallway, watching nurses come and go, hearing snatches of conversations he didn't understand. He stared at the door behind which his father lay, wondering if the damage had already gone too far, wondering what it would mean if it had. Finally, Dr. Levens emerged with a folder in hand and a grave expression. "You're his son?" he asked. Nathan stood. "Yeah." "Come with me." Inside the consultation room, Dr. Levens laid out several CT images on the screen. He pointed to a cluster of dense specks near the lower spine, irregular, scattered. "These are metal fragments," he said. "Probably shrapnel, as he said. There's quite a bit." Nathan nodded. "He's lived with them for 50 years. I'm not surprised he's in pain, but that's not the main concern." He clicked to another image. "This," he said, highlighting a cloudy mass near the fragments, "is a tumor. It's grown around the foreign objects. Could be the body's inflammatory response to the metal, or something more aggressive. It's pressing on the nerves, which explains the spasms, the numbness, the weakness." Nathan swallowed hard. "Can it be removed?" Dr. Levens was quiet for a beat too long. "Technically, yes, but the area is delicate. It would require spinal surgery, high risk, especially at his age. There's also the possibility that some fragments are too close to major nerves to extract safely." Nathan took a deep breath. "What happens if we don't do it? The tumor will grow. He'll lose mobility, eventually control of his bowels, bladder, and yes, eventually, his life." Nathan sat down. "I'll talk to him," the doctor said gently. "But I need to know, will he listen?" Nathan looked at the screen. at the hazy shadows of the war still lodged inside his father. He just found out the man he thought died because of him actually survived. So maybe, for the first time in 50 years, he's ready. Dr. Levens nodded. Let's hope so. Back in the hospital room, Raymond was sitting upright, hands folded neatly in his lap like he was waiting for judgment. Nathan stepped in, holding the scan printouts. Raymond's eyes lifted, wary. Bad? Not good. Raymond nodded once. I figured, you've got a tumor, Dad, wrapped around the old metal. It's pressing on your spine. Raymond stared at him. So this is how I go. Doesn't have to be. They can operate. That's a gamble. Yeah. But not gambling means pain, paralysis, death. That's not just a gamble, that's certainty. Raymond looked down at his hands. And if I go in, I might not wake up. Nathan hesitated, then said, that might be true. But if you do wake up, you could finally stop running. Raymond was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice smaller than Nathan had ever heard from him, he said, I'm tired, son. I know. I'm scared. Nathan pulled the chair closer. So am I. Raymond looked at him again, really looked, and for the first time, Nathan saw something new in his father's eyes. Hope. The next morning, the hospital room was filled with too much light. Raymond sat by the window, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, his face drawn and unreadable. The snow outside reflected against the glass, casting a harsh glow on his skin. Nathan sat nearby, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee, stealing glances at his father every few minutes. Neither of them spoke for a long while. They want an answer, Raymond finally said. Nathan looked up about the surgery. Raymond nodded. The doctor said he'd give me a day to decide. Nathan leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking. Raymond started, then trailed off. He pressed his fingers to his temple like he was searching for the right words. I'm thinking about waking up and not being able to move, about being stuck in a bed, pissing in a tube, waiting for the next infection to finish the job. That's one possibility. Raymond glanced at him. And the other? You wake up, and you have time. Time to fix things. Time to feel something again besides pain. Raymond gave a short, bitter laugh. At my age, what's there to fix? Nathan didn't answer. He knew better than to push. Just then, the door opened. Sarah stood in the doorway, coat still on, snow melting in her hair. Her eyes locked on her father, then moved to Nathan. I came as soon as I could, she said. You didn't call. I didn't think you wanted to be called, Nathan replied. Sarah crossed the room and set her bag on the chair. She looked at Raymond carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. You look like hell, she said. I've been told, Raymond muttered. Sarah sat beside the bed. So, what's the plan? Raymond didn't look at her, still deciding. You're kidding. Her voice was sharper than she intended. You're still thinking about whether you want to live? Raymond's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, she said. You're scared. I get it. But fear is not a good enough reason to do nothing. It's not fear, he snapped. It's realism. I know my body. I know what 50 years of rot feels like. I've been carrying death on my back since 70. This is just the final step. Sarah leaned in. No, this is the part where you finally stop punishing yourself. You think Mike died so you could sit in a dark room and drink yourself to death in Indiana? He wrote you. He forgave you. He lived. Raymond's face twitched and Nathan could see the words land like a blow. I'm tired, Raymond whispered. So are we, Sarah said, softer now. But we showed up anyway. Raymond looked between his children, one on each side of the bed, both worn down by years of absence and silence. His gaze settled on Nathan. You think I should do it? I think, Nathan said, choosing each word carefully, that you've been dying for 50 years. This is your chance to live again. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, do it, not for us, do it for you. Raymond stared at the floor for a long time. Then he spoke so quietly, they almost missed it. I don't know how to come back. Sarah reached over and took his hand. Then let us bring you back. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Carter, Dr. Levens would like to know if you've made a decision. Raymond didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands, aged and worn, the same hands that had directed air. Traffic, carried dying men, held letters he couldn't bring himself to open. He took a breath. Tell him yes. The hospital room had quieted by late afternoon. The nurses dimmed the lights, and the snow outside had begun to fall in thick, steady sheets. A sense of stillness hung in the air, heavy like the pause before a storm. Raymond sat upright in the hospital bed, IV tubing taped to his arm, monitors beeping softly behind him. Nathan sat across the room, reading, pretending not to watch. A small voice recorder sat in Raymond's lap. It was an old model, bulky, scratched, reliable. Nathan had brought it in earlier that morning, just in case. Raymond stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he pressed record. The red light blinked on. He cleared his throat. "If you're hearing this," he began, his voice rough with age and nerves, "then either I didn't make it out of surgery, or I did, and finally grew the spine to let someone listen to what I should have said a long time ago." He paused. "I've lived most of my life trying to forget the war, or maybe just hide it. But some things, they don't stay buried. They climb out, in the dark, in your sleep, in the way your daughter flinches when you raise your voice, or your son stops asking you questions because he's tired of being ignored." Raymond leaned back into the pillows, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "My name is Raymond Carter. I served in the United States Air Force. I was a traffic controller, stationed in Tan Son Nhut Air Base, Saigon, 1970. I wasn't on the front lines. I wasn't kicking down doors or clearing villages. I was the guy behind the mic, guiding planes through enemy airspace, telling scared pilots how not to die." He swallowed. "I used to think that made me lucky, that I got to come home with all my limbs, that I could blend back in, maybe even forget, but I didn't come back whole. I came back with ghosts." His hand trembled slightly as he continued. "There was a man named Mike Delaney, tech sergeant, radar specialist, smartass, smoked menthols like they were going out of style. He was my best friend." Raymond's voice softened. "One night we went out to investigate a downed aircraft. We weren't supposed to. We weren't trained for recon. But we went anyway. Thought we could do something. Thought we could save someone." He drew in a breath, his eyes glazing over. "There was a mine. It blew. I got hit in the back. Mike got pinned under wreckage. He told me to run. Said it was the only way either of us would make it." Raymond closed his eyes. "So I did. I ran, and I told myself he died in the second blast. That there was nothing I could have done. That I had no choice. I told everyone else the same thing." He opened his eyes again, now glassy with tears. "But the truth is, I don't know. Maybe he would have lived if I'd stayed. Maybe we both would have died. I've played out both versions in my head 1,000 times." A long silence stretched out before he spoke again. "I found his letter. 50 years too late. He lived. He forgave me. He moved on. And I never did." The machine continued to blink, recording every word. "I became someone I don't recognize. I drank. I shut everyone out. I let my wife carry my silence until it crushed her. I let my children grow up wondering what they'd done wrong. But it wasn't them. It was me. It was always me." His voice cracked. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you, Nathan, Sarah, to know the silence wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I didn't know how to be around people who weren't broken." Raymond reached forward and adjusted the mic slightly. "And if there's someone listening to this years from now, someone who never went to war but carries a weight they can't explain, I want you to hear me when I say this. Guilt is not loyalty. Suffering isn't atonement. You don't have to bleed forever to prove you remember." Another pause. "I don't know if I'll survive this surgery, but for the first time in 50 years, I think I want to." He exhaled. "Mike, if you're out there, and you somehow hear this, I'm sorry. I hope you lived a good life. I hope you forgave me before I learned how to forgive myself." A tear slipped down Raymond's cheek. "And to my kids, thank you for staying, even when I didn't make it easy." He reached forward, clicked stop. The red light blinked off. Raymond sat there for a long moment, eyes closed, face lifted toward the ceiling as if waiting for something, maybe a voice from the past, maybe just the silence to feel different now. Across the room, Nathan pretended to keep reading, but he'd heard every word, and for the first time in his life, he understood who his father really was. The operating room was cold. Raymond lay on the table, surrounded by monitors, metal tools, and strangers in scrubs. His breath fogged the oxygen mask slightly. He could hear the beat of his heart, steady, stubborn. A nurse placed a hand on his shoulder. "You'll be asleep before the count of 10, Mr. Carter," she said gently. Raymond didn't reply. He looked up at the surgical lights, bright and blinding, like a sun he hadn't seen in years. In his mind, he thought of Mike, of that night in the jungle, of the smoke, the heat, the blood. And then everything went black. Outside the OR, Nathan paced the hallway. Sarah sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, her legs crossed, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her foot tapped rhythmically on the tile. "How long has it been?" she asked. Nathan glanced at the clock. "Almost 2 hours." Sarah exhaled. "I hate this part." Nathan nodded. "Me too." They lapsed into silence. Sarah looked up. "Do you think he's doing this for us? Or for himself?" "I think, for once, he's doing something because he wants to feel alive again." Sarah didn't respond. She leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes flicking toward the OR doors. "I used to think he didn't love us," she said quietly. "That he just didn't care." Nathan looked at her. "Same. But now," she continued, "I think he cared too much, and he didn't know how to show it." Nathan sat down beside her. The letter from Mike, it broke something in him, but it also opened something. "He spent 50 years blaming himself," Sarah whispered. "What do you even do with that kind of pain?" Nathan sighed. "You survive it, one step at a time." They sat together, not speaking, listening to the faint hum of hospital machinery and the occasional voice over the intercom. Inside the OR, the surgeons worked in silence. Dr. Levins hovered over Raymond's exposed spine, guiding his team with quiet precision. "There's a cluster here," he said, pointing with a tool. 3 fragments. One's near the nerve root. The anesthesiologist monitored Raymond's vitals. "Pressure steady. He's holding." Dr. Levins nodded. "Let's keep going." In the darkness of anesthesia, Raymond dreamed. He was back in the control tower in Saigon, but it was empty. The radar screens were dark. The headset on the console buzzed softly. He walked through the rows of machines, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. Outside the windows, the sky was stained orange, smoke curling like fingers through the clouds. A voice came through the static. "Ray, you there?" It was Mike. Raymond turned. "Mike, you left me." "I had to, I know." Raymond looked down. His hands were covered in dirt, his boots soaked in rain. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The static deepened. "I forgave you a long time ago," Mike's voice said. "Now you have to forgive yourself." Raymond's breath caught in his throat. "I don't know how." "Start by waking up." Dr. Levins leaned closer to the monitor. "Last one's out. Minimal bleeding." He stepped back. "Close him up." The team moved swiftly, methodically. The beeping of the heart monitor remained steady. The anesthesiologist checked the vitals again. "He's stable." Dr. Levins exhaled. "Let's hope he stays that way." Hours later, Nathan and Sarah stood when the doctor finally emerged. He removed his surgical cap, tired lines around his eyes. "He's alive," Dr. Levins said. Nathan's shoulders dropped. Sarah covered her mouth. "There were some complications, adhesions around the tumor, but we got most of it. There may be some nerve damage, but we won't know the extent until he wakes up." "When will that be?" Sarah asked. "Could be an hour, could be more. But he made it through." Nathan reached out and shook the doctor's hand. "Thank you," Dr. Levins nodded. "He's stronger than he looks." They followed the nurse to recovery. Raymond was lying still, pale, a tangle of wires and tubes surrounding him. Machines blinked softly in the low light. Sarah sat beside the bed, taking his hand. "You did it, Dad." Nathan stood behind her, his voice quiet. "Now come back." They waited, and Raymond breathed. Recovery was slow. Raymond spent the first day mostly unconscious, waking only for short moments, mumbling incoherently, drifting back under sedation. The second day was better. He could speak, though his voice was hoarse, and he could move his fingers and toes, which the doctors took as a good sign. Sarah was the first one to see him smile. It wasn't much, just the faint upward curve of a mouth too tired for full expression, but it was real. She had been sitting by his bedside, reading aloud from one of the old books she used to love as a child. She stopped mid-sentence when she noticed it. "You're awake," she whispered. Raymond blinked slowly, then turned his head toward her. "You never finished that story," he murmured. Sarah laughed, tears suddenly welling. "I will." Nathan arrived soon after with coffee and fresh clothes. The room smelled less like antiseptic and more like family now. Nurses came and went. Visitors passed in the hallway, but inside that small room, time seemed to slow, like the Carter family had been given a Second chance to sit in the same space without yelling or silence eating away at them. By the end of the third day, Raymond could sit up on his own. He insisted on shaving, even though it took nearly 20 minutes, and left small cuts along his chin. War wounds, he joked, pointing to them in the mirror. Sarah rolled her eyes, but Nathan chuckled. Not bad for a guy with a spine full of metal shrapnel, Nathan said. Raymond smirked. Less metal now. On the fourth day, something changed. Raymond sat in his hospital chair, looking out the window at the snow-covered city. Nathan was helping the nurse adjust his fourth. Sarah was organizing some flowers on the windowsill. Do you think they're still alive? Raymond asked suddenly. Sarah turned. Who? Mike's family. Nathan looked up. You mean his kids? Raymond nodded. He had a daughter. Maybe more by now. I don't know, but if they're out there. Sarah tilted her head. What are you thinking? Raymond was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think I owe them the truth. Nathan pulled a chair closer. You want to write to them? I do, Raymond said. I don't know what I'll say, but I have to try. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Dictate. I'll write. Raymond smiled weakly. Look at us. A regular operation. Sarah opened the notebook and lifted her pen. Raymond took a deep breath, then began. Dear family of Mike Delaney, you don't know me, or maybe you do, as a name your father once mentioned. My name is Raymond Carter. I served with Mike in Vietnam. We were stationed at Tan Son Nhut in 1970. I've carried something for 50 years that I should have shared a long time ago. Your father saved my life. More than once. He was the kind of man who made war seem survivable, not just with tactics, but with laughter, with presence. There was a night, I'm sure you've heard about it. The incident in the jungle, I was with him. There was an explosion. I believed for many years that he had died there. I ran, like he told me to. I lived because of him, and then I buried the truth. But I recently discovered he survived, that he made it home, that he wrote to me. I never opened the letter until now. That's a mistake I'll carry for the rest of my days. If he ever spoke of me, I hope it was kindly. And if not, I understand. I failed him in that moment. But I never stopped remembering. Your father was the best man I've ever known, and I'm sorry I never told you that sooner. With respect and regret, Raymond Carter and Sarah finished writing and looked up. Her eyes were glassy. That was beautiful, she said. Raymond nodded, his expression unreadable. Can you mail it? I will. Nathan stood by the window. Snow was still falling, but more gently now, like the storm had passed. She might write back, he said. Raymond didn't look hopeful or afraid. Just at peace. Maybe, he said. But even if she doesn't, I finally said what needed saying. Sarah placed the notebook gently on the bedside table. For the first time in decades, the past had stopped whispering. The morning Raymond died was unremarkable. No alarms rang, no nurses rushed in, no monitors screamed warnings. He simply didn't wake up. A nurse found him just after sunrise. His eyes were closed, mouth slightly open, one hand resting gently over the blanket. The room was still, serene. Nathan arrived 30 minutes later, eyes red-rimmed, but dry. Sarah came not long after, clutching the notebook with Raymond's last letter still folded inside. Neither spoke much. There was no need. Grief had taken on a new shape, softer, quieter. They sat together by the window while the hospital staff handled the paperwork. The air in the room felt different now, not empty, not heavy, just still. On the bedside table sat the voice recorder. Nathan reached over and pressed play. The sound of Raymond's voice filled the room, steady and low. If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't make it. Sarah closed her eyes. But that's okay, because I finally said what needed saying. I finally stopped hiding. And if this is the end, at least it's one I chose. One I walked into, instead of ran from. The voice crackled slightly, but the words were clear. I want you to remember something. Not the war, not the silence, but the parts of me that laughed, that loved, that tried, even when I failed. Nathan stared out the window as the snow continued to fall, delicate and slow, like time itself was pausing to listen. I spent 50 years locked in one moment, but you set me free. You, both of you, gave me back the pieces of myself I thought I'd buried. A long pause. Then don't carry my silence, carry the stories, carry the laughter, Carry the forgiveness. Sarah leaned forward, tears slipping down her cheeks. And when you look at your own scars, because you'll have them in ways big and small, don't hide them, don't worship them, just understand them, then let them go. The recording clicked softly as it ended. The room fell silent again, but it wasn't the same silence that used to follow Raymond around like a shadow. This one was gentle, settled. Later that day, they packed his belongings. The nurses gave them time. No one rushed. Nathan folded Raymond's flannel shirt with a strange kind of reverence, while Sarah placed the medals, the notebook, and the voice recorder into a small box. On the nightstand, there was a folded piece of paper. Sarah picked it up. It was addressed to both of them. A Nathan and Sarah, if I go, don't bury me in that stiff old uniform. Oh, I hated that thing. Flannel's just fine. Put me next to your mother if there's room. If not, someplace with trees. I always liked trees. No big service, no speeches, no taps. Just play something simple. And make sure the grandkids know I wasn't always this old and grumpy. Thank you for giving me back my voice. I love you, Dad. And Nathan smiled. Sarah laughed through her tears. Outside the hospital, the wind had died down. The sky was clearing. Inside, a man's story had finally found its end, not with silence, but with the sound of his own voice, finally heard. It was a small gathering, just as he'd asked. A dozen chairs arranged in a semicircle beneath the tall oak trees at the edge of Willow Creek Cemetery. The ground was soft with spring thaw. Birds chirped above, unaware of the solemnity below. No uniforms, no trumpets, just family and flannel. Nathan stood quietly at the front, hands folded in front of him. He wore his father's favorite shirt, a red and black checkered one, that Raymond had insisted was too broken in to ever be replaced. Sarah stood beside him, one hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. A simple wooden box rested on a small table between them. There were no speeches scheduled, no priest, no pastor, just silence and space for words that mattered. Nathan cleared his throat and stepped forward. My dad wasn't a talker, he said. Most of you know that. A few soft chuckles rippled through the family. For a long time I thought that meant he didn't care. That silence meant absence, but I was wrong. He glanced up at the branches above, then back down. My father carried more than I could have imagined. He carried war. He carried guilt. And he carried it so we wouldn't have to. But in the end, he finally let it go. Nathan reached into his coat and pulled out the small voice recorder. He left us something, he said. Not instructions, not regrets, just truth. He pressed play. Raymond's voice, warm and steady, floated through the trees. Don't carry my silence. Carry the stories. Carry the laughter. Carry the forgiveness. Nathan paused the recording there, enough to feel it, not overwhelm it. He nodded toward his niece, Sarah's daughter, Lucy, age 11, who stepped forward with a folded piece of paper. She stood in front of the box and read clearly, her voice small but sure. I used to think my grandpa didn't like people. He never came to school plays. He forgot birthdays. He didn't smile much. But before he passed, he told my mom that he loved us, that he just didn't know how to show it. And I think that's kind of like a seed. You don't see it growing at first, but if you wait, it becomes something big. Lucy looked up, blinked, then returned to her mother's side. No one clapped. No one needed to. Nathan turned back toward the table. He wanted to be buried next to Mom, and in flannel, not medals. He smiled. So we honored that. He took a breath, then rested a hand on the wooden box. This isn't goodbye, not really. He's part of every stubborn word we say, every pause that holds more than silence, every scar we carry with a little less shame. He looked around at the trees, the people, the new season blooming around them. My father didn't die a war hero. He died something better. He died whole. Nathan stepped back. The wind picked up gently, rustling the leaves, as if the world itself had paused to listen. And somewhere between the roots of the trees and the breath of the sky, Raymond Carter was finally home. A month after the funeral, Nathan sat alone in his father's study. The room had barely changed since the day Raymond left it for the hospital. Books still lined the shelves. The old desk lamp flickered with its signature buzz. His chair sat in the corner, empty, yet still somehow filled with presence. Nathan opened the small box he had carried back from the hospital. Inside was the voice recorder. He held it in his hands for a long time before pressing play. Raymond's voice filled the room again. The same calm, low tone, the same honesty. Nathan listened from beginning to end. Then he opened his laptop. He wrote a letter, not to family this time, but to a National Veterans Archive, an organization that collected oral histories of those who had served. A place where silence could be broken in safe, meaningful ways. He attached the file, added a few details, hit send. 2 weeks later, he received a response. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for submitting your father's oral history. After careful review, we would be honored to include his testimony in our National Archive. His words, raw, honest, and courageous, speak to the experiences of countless veterans who never found the words to share their pain. We plan to feature excerpts of his recording in an upcoming broadcast dedicated to post-war healing and remembrance. We believe your father's voice can help others find theirs. With gratitude, Veterans Voices Initiative. Nathan read it 3 times. Then he called Sarah the following Sunday. Nathan and Sarah sat together on her couch, her kids curled up around them. The living room was quiet. On the TV screen, a simple white logo appeared. Veterans Voices, Stories That Heal. The segment opened with a montage of old black and white war footage. Then a slow fade to a single photo. Raymond Carter, age 22, in uniform, leaning against a communications tower in Vietnam. Then came his voice. I wasn't a soldier in the trenches. I was the voice in their ear. I told them how to land, how to live. I couldn't save them all. I still hear the ones I lost. Images of faded dog tags, letters never sent. Veterans sitting alone on front porches. I came back with pieces of men, not in my hands, just in my memory. And those memories, they weigh more than gear. A nurse appeared on screen, talking about the silence many veterans carry. Then, a therapist. Then another veteran, speaking about how he had never told his wife about the war until he heard Raymond's voice. Nathan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just Raymond's story anymore. It belonged to every man and woman who had ever swallowed a scream, every family that lived with echoes. Every child who didn't understand why Dad didn't come to the school play. Near the end of the broadcast, they played Raymond's closing words. You don't have to bleed forever to prove you remember. Don't carry my silence. Carry the stories, carry the laughter, carry the forgiveness. Sarah wiped her eyes. Lucy held her hand tightly. Nathan leaned back, a deep breath filling his lungs. The screen faded to black. Just before the credits, a final sentence appeared in white. Don't carry silence. Carry meaning. When somewhere, in a small town in Ohio, a retired Marine played the recording for his son. In Texas, a woman placed it beside her father's folded flag. In California, a young man heard it and picked up the phone to call his estranged dad. And in Indiana, under the trees Raymond Carter once loved, a spring breeze moved through, the branches, soft and sure, as if carrying something far older than words, as if carrying something finally set free. He didn't leave behind glory or medals in a glass case. He left something far more powerful, a voice, a story, a chance for healing. In the quiet moments after war, after anger, after silence, Raymond Carter's story reminds us that some wounds don't bleed, but they ache for a lifetime. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is to finally speak. So if you're watching this, and you've ever carried a silence too heavy to name, know this, you are not alone. You are not broken, and it's never too late to come home to yourself. Somewhere out there, under a tree, in a flannel shirt, and the peace he searched for all his life, Raymond Carter is resting, and maybe, just maybe, he's listening. So tell me, who in your life needs to be heard? And if it's you, what would you say? If someone finally listened? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes your words might help someone else find theirs. And if this story moved you, made you pause, or made you feel less alone, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Here, we don't just tell stories. We remember, we reflect, and we heal together.